Welcome to the DMF. I'm Justin Younts. This is part four.
Things come back.
What do you think are some exercises that actors could do that could lead them to would you say this is more into the conscientious category
hmm
to being more conscientious about that? Is that
Well, I set time in a calendar, like, set a timeout and saying, this is a time of day. And, could give or take, time doesn't have to be, but put it down in writing. Because research has also shown when you put something in writing like that, it's real. So
yeah,
put it in your calendar and say, okay, for this time, for an hour, I'm going to rehearse the scene today, every day. You choose a time and write it down and commit to it.
yeah,
And hold, and form that circle, that success circle, the accountability circle, who can then say, each other can check in and say, hey, did you run your lines today? Or let's all meet at Zoom at 4 o'clock and do like a work, station or workshop where we read, scenes and we, offer
yeah.
feedback to each other. Those are things, daily habits you can do. Um, you know, don't waste time on productive things. Now, social media is great, but some actors get so caught up in social media, for voicing, political stuff, moral stuff,
Yeah.
and I think it's important. Okay, you want to be active, you want to have an activist voice, great. But sometimes I'll see actors that will write like pages of posts on social media, and I'm thinking to myself, I'm not
Yeah,
everyone. You're entitled to your opinion. However, why are you should be
yeah.
rehearsing too. You should be
Exactly.
studying. You should be studying right now, um, and not focusing your energy here.
And you
Um,
and you could have the same situation that happened with that guy in the waiting room. Somebody sees that and goes, "Oh, that's how you feel about that." Well, I
well,
think this is
and that's why I make the point. I'm like, look, it doesn't matter what side anybody's on any political or religious or spiritual persuasion. When you're negative like that,
yeah,
regardless of who it is, it's not
yeah,
going to look good. Even if we share the same
yeah,
feelings about, said person, if you post all about that all the time, it's
yeah,
going to, I'm not going to want to rep you, and no one's going
yeah.
to want to bring you on set because we're going to be worried that,
If you're gonna, go into, a religious or a political tirade, and everyone's gonna be like, "Well, okay,
yeah,
how are we supposed to work together?"
yeah. And that's also another thing I think that needs to be taught is like, talent is great, but also one of the biggest predictors of success as an actor is being very good on set,
Yep.
being someone that everyone loves to work with, being
Yeah.
gracious, being professional, following directions, being on
Yeah.
time, and, not arguing, with the director or the producer.
Yeah.
Again, even if you personally disagree,
Yeah.
it's their project. It's
Yeah.
their
Yeah.
thing, that your role is to fulfill that their vision. Yes, there may be times where they may say, what do you think?
Yeah.
And then you could say it in a suggestive way. But another thing that I've seen with successful clients are those that everyone loves working with.
Yeah. You want to be able to work with everybody, and not
hmm
just a few. Um, I think with social media, if you want to keep it more private, like if you're just messaging friends or something like
Yeah,
that,
I mean,
that's one way.
sending DMs is one thing. You want to talk about this, but posting it,
Yeah.
even or I would say, if you really are that active, committed to that, then you should create a personal account
Yeah.
that and block it so that nobody can see that
Yeah.
except people that are within that circle, and then have an acting account, you as an actor, which
Yeah.
should have nothing about those types of posts.
Yeah.
Um, that would be my suggestion. But again, don't put too much of your energy into that. And
Yeah.
I was talking about another podcast earlier, was that I think that also has other issues going on in the actor's personal life.
Mm.
That's kind of causing them to go on rants like that, even though it's targeted towards some, specifically.
Yeah.
There's a lot of times it could be previous trauma that's coming up that's really causing
Yeah.
someone to get that emotional and that upset.
And then the tendency to post it so that everyone can see this tirade. We all have our moments, but I don't think we need to post it so the whole
No,
world can see it. And I think that's the problem.
yeah, I mean, even if I go on like if I have a bad day with a client or the agency, I may get peed off, but you're not gonna see me putting a rant on social media about it because
Yeah.
A, it's a waste of my time.
Yeah.
It's not gonna do anything, and B, it's gonna look like, okay, this guy's bitter. Why would
Yeah.
I want to work with an agent that's bitter or why? And the same thing with an actor. So again, so you got to be careful with social media and don't waste too much time on social media because
Yeah.
there's the idea of doom scrolling where you'll sit there for hours sometimes, not even realizing it's hours that you could have used to be studying.
Yeah.
You could have used that to be working on stuff, submitting yourself,
Yeah.
networking.
Yeah. I mean, that I think that's the danger of social media is getting stuck in that, the doom scroll. And you eventually just have to say, listen, I've spent enough time on this. I need to, if you want to do a little bit of that, get off on
Yeah,
that, but use it productively to find somebody or post something that, is important. But I don't know. See, that's the thing with social media. It seems like it's a catch 22.
it
The
really is because we it's there's a lot of great things about it,
Yeah.
but at the same time, it can also be not so good, depending
Yeah.
on how well you spend time on it. Even for younger people, there was, a large study done in 2019 that demonstrated that the amount of hours spent on Instagram equaled more depression, especially in teenagers. So,
Yeah.
while we think we're being connected, we're actually not. And it's isolating us even more and more by, focusing so much on social media.
And I think the comparison is the thing that starts to really happen. Is this comparison of I'm
Hmm.
like this, I'm like that, I want to be this. And I think people get, frustrated, with that. Get back to directing actors. When you are like working with them, just maybe you've got to coach them in a scene or something, or you're working. How do you like to work with actors?
Well, I mean, I'm not an acting teacher, so I make that very clear that they should go for an acting coach, who's someone who is trained to do that. But I will sometimes get feedback and general feedback on a self tape. But
Yeah.
generally, I look for authenticity. That's my, like thing that I've found working. Bookable actors do is that they're authentic. It doesn't seem like they're acting at all.
Yeah.
And so, a lot of times I might tell people to dial it down a bit, especially if they've been trained on stage and theater.
Yeah. Yeah.
They going from theater on camera is a totally different thing. And sometimes a lot of theater actors like to be very big and expressive, which works, if you're projecting on a, 100 to 150 seat theater. It doesn't work at all when you're on, intimate setting like a camera.
Robin Williams said that he had to learn that. He said when he was doing, Mick Morgan Mendy and stuff, it was still on a stage and everything. So when he got to like doing films, he had to like really be more subtle and realize that like every little thing is going to be picked up. So it's like you don't need to do much.
Yeah, yeah, it's less is more, and that's hard for a lot of actors too.
Yeah.
Is just to kind of be really do everything less, and just keep things as a less is more. I mean, if you look at even like Law and Order, how a lot of the actors, it's very monotone, flat,
Yeah.
and that's how it should be done. I mean, not everything, but that would be an example of
Yeah.
you know keeping it to a minimalist normal tone.
Yeah.
How would you say this line to somebody on the street or to your friend?
Yeah.
Rather than going all full on theatrical, just try that. So things like that. And sometimes I would recommend, okay, you should go get a coach, especially if it's a big audition.
Yeah.
You should not be trying, and it's not a reflection of how well you are as an actor.
Yeah.
If you've got a big audition, you definitely should be going
Yeah.
to a coach.
Yeah. My acting coach is all about that. He's like, you got a big audition, you come to me, because it's not something you want to be messing around with.
No, and that's another thing too that what really kind of throws me off is like, let's say I get somebody, 8 pages of an audition due in 2 days, and then like 2 hours later, like I'm done. Wait, what? You know, and it's not that it was horrible, but it was like, if you really took the time and worked with a coach, how much better would this be?
Yeah, yeah, and
How
you're
much
just
better of a
rushing it
performance?
in. Yeah, you're just like going, "Look, it's done," and it's like, this is art. It's not 2 plus 2 equals 4. You gotta spend some time on it. One of the things that when I have lines is, I like to say it different inflections and in
Yeah,
different ways. I like to almost imagine, what if there's a comma here instead of here? So that I'll
yeah,
say it differently.
and then just say what works for you.
Please like, share, and subscribe. Thank you.